All right, so the first project I'm going to try and tackle is I'm going to try and modify this existing cross bar to go across this engine bay to connect the two shock towers. It may not work, may still be too high. I might have to go with another bar that wraps around the back, but we'll see if I can modify this one first. The first thing I wanted to do was to take, and I made these plates up. I recovered these weld studs from the Challenger hinge point plates that I showed you before. And what this does is these two holes, this is actually the wrong side, but they line up with these two holes over here and mount this up and push the mounting point for this bar out beyond where the fender would be. In other words, this is buried underneath the fender here, so I have to get the actual bolt and unbolt plate to push into the center of the car. Anyway, got these two plates made up, and I got to figure out whether or not that bar there is going to work. Also, you can see the gas shocks work just dandy without the upper skin on this thing, so weight is definitely an issue. Here's why it's a good thing to have this skin off the substructure so you can see what's going on. I didn't even notice this. You know, I planned my gas pistons to fall right in the center here, figuring I would have the lots of clearance, but I forgot about these little indentions that they've got in the hood. They're just where the rubber stops go to align the hood, so they're not really necessary to be there. But what happens, you could see that the gas piston, the side of the body was rubbing here. So I went ahead and I relief cut this around here. I'll probably relieve it a little bit more once the hood is all together. But also the crossbar, I'm going to show you that in a minute. It works pretty good. But the stud was hitting the hinge plate, the stud that I had sticking up through. So I just cut the stud off flush with the nut once the nut was tightened on there. Now I've got maybe 1/8 of an inch of clearance on that side. So again, on this side here, it was a little bit worse. So I just clearanced this out. Again, I'll have to clearance this up to maybe there will be only about 1/8 of an inch of material here, or I'll pull the material out a little bit. One or the other. I'll put a span across here once the hood is and the skin and the understructure are together, and I might just remove this indention altogether. Anyway, same situation over here. The stud had to be cut off flush in order for that bar to drop down, but it is working in the spot that it is. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so what I did was I cut off the end. Now normally, this is the piece right here. You can see it's got boxing in there. It's just a 60 thousandths piece of sheet metal, and it has these little towers in there so that when you tighten it down from the top side with long bolts, it doesn't distort this, it doesn't crush it. Anyway, I eliminated this height to about 3/16 of an inch. It ends up being about 1/4 by the time I'm done with it. And I slid a plate in and welded that plate in to resubstantiate this piece right here. I cut it on a bevel here to miss this part of the shock tower. I just got the one stud, so this kind of goes over this plate side to side. This is where I was telling you that it just touches this hinge plate right here. Actually, it's just a little bit clear of it now that I just cut it off flush. But I was thinking, well, I should have put a captured nut in, but it would have been the same amount of distance if I put a bolt through the top side or a nut on the back side, so no need to re-engineer that whole thing. It goes across the engine just fine. It's got a little bit of pressure on this transmission fill tube here, so what I'm going to do is do a little relief cut there, fill that in, and again over on this side here, so this bar is now removable beyond the fender. The fender's out to here, so you can pull this out if you need to. And the next thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to re-engineer the mount for this computer, because that normally mounts right there. So what I'll do is I'll make a tab over here that'll, or maybe not, maybe that's going to be too much. I already have clearance issues there, so I might have to transfer the tab all the way to over here. Anyway, I'm going to work on that because I can't reach this mounting point anymore. It's underneath the fender. The other thing that has to be moved is there's a little button here. Don't know what it's for, don't want to eliminate it. So I'll have to move that over here and put some sort of a pad on the bottom side of the hood in order to actuate that button that's actuated when the hood closes. Alright, so this is what I call the stepping stone approach to repositioning this bracket. It's actually just dropping straight down a little bit because it normally mounts to the top of this bar here in this location. So what I've done is I've just gone ahead and remounted it in that location and cleaned all of this metal up here. And then what I'll do is I'll attach a new mounting point way over here that's clear of the hinges, because obviously there's an interference issue with the hinges, so I can't have it up that high. And then once that's established, then I can cut away this part of the bracket over here. And actually I'm going to try and retrieve this portion of the bracket because you have to take this and move this over somewheres in this neighborhood over here. Anyway, that's the approach I'm going to take. It, like I said, it's a stepping stone. Make sure that this bracket is established before I remove this part of the bracket. And that way it stays in the same location, but the new bolt down is way out here where you can get to it. Okay, so I pulled everything out of the car, so it'll be easier to work on out here. Less chance of throwing sparks into the engine compartment. Anyway, so I tacked the bracket to this crossbar, and then once I had it out of the car, I created a new bracket to mend to it here, and then create two new attachment points for quarter 20 or number 10s, whatever I end up finding flange nuts for. Now I'll be able to cut this loose. Also, I'll be able to now cut this away and recover this little tab here, which I'll relocate over here someplace for that little button. Don't know what that button is for. It could just be for the for a light or something under the hood, but I don't see any light under the hood. Looks like it's something more important than that. Anyways, I digress. On to the next thing. Alright, so I've got it all painted out and reassembled in here. As you can see, I've got a little relief cut going there for this tube, so there's plenty of room there. It's not rubbing. I've got the computer remounted in its new location. These two bolts right here. Everything's where it was, except for this piece right here, which I moved way inboard. That's that little plunger. I have no idea what it does, but I'm not going to exclude it. I got a little trick here I learned from a channel called Sprayway Customs. They're got some really absolutely awesome work out of a little one-stall paint booth. I mean, unbelievable stuff. But anyway, I just put a little tape on this, and I want to mark it on the hood, so I just put a little silver paint on there and then close the hood, and there's my mark right there, so I know exactly where center is for this button. As far as I have to put an adjustable pad there that I'll make sure that when I close the hood that's depressed. Okay, I hope you can see that. Right there is just a quarter 20 bolt with a washer just welded onto the top of it, and then another nut at the base that will lock it into position whenever I get it adjusted. It needs to push that plunger down by about a half an inch on the top side. The universal capture nut right there on the top side for that to wind into. That gives me an adjustable stop. A little bit tough focusing in here, but anyways, that gives me a little bit of an adjustment to get that get the full travel out of that plunger. Okay, so another reason it's a good idea to keep all this, keep the upper skin off of this so you can see through and see around and see what's going on. I mean, there's an awful lot going on in here, and when I was adjusting this, there's this little pad that I put in here to press down on this plunger no matter where the adjustment was, I was watching and I was noticing that this hood, when it was closed, was rocking up in the back. I was like, what the heck is hitting there? So I kept adjusting on it. Finally, I took the adjuster all the way out and dropped it, and had nothing to do with the plunger after all. Turns out there was some interference. You see the way this bracket kicks up a little bit here? There's just enough of an issue here to where I had to cut away a little scallop here for the body of this piston. Also, there was a little bit of interference where this was hitting the bracket, so I cut about 2 inches away from the actual hood hinge plate. And finally, when I dropped it down, I actually didn't need a whole half of an inch of adjustment. It only required a quarter of an inch of adjustment. So back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I've got everything to drop down and sit without any interference. But just got to keep an eye on things, because that was an easy one to miss, because it was just a slight tilt that was going on. But as I looked at it closer, you could see the bottom of this piston first was hitting the top of that bracket, and you know, it's easy to miss that kind of stuff. And considering the stings, I have to make sure that you'll be able to unbolt once the wider fenders are on the car. One of the bolt attachment points that'll be covered, just not by much, but just enough that you won't be able to get to it, is the one that holds this water container to the shock tower. So, you know, it doesn't seem like it seems like it's in there so tight you wouldn't really need it, the second attachment point, but you don't want it rocking around like that, because being plastic, you could wear a hole in this thing from going back and forth. So what I've got here is I've made a plate out of aluminum, and then I've got an offset point where it's going to bolt to that'll be accessible, and there's plenty of room to pull this whole thing out from under. I'll rivet this with some aluminum rivets as to not to stress this plastic, because the aluminum's a little bit softer, and then the steel rivets, and they won't expand. They'll be soft enough that they won't hopefully crack this plastic. Okay, so that's that assembly on right there. Just wanted to show it to you before I went on to something else. All right, I don't know if you can see this down in here, but what I've done is I've cleared out this box all the way around, so that this hinge assembly here, well, no, there's a cavity here, so this can drop through here, and then when it's closed, I have clearance for the mechanism. It's a little awkward working one-handed here, but anyway, next thing that I've done is I've taken, and this is a representation of what the filter would be. It's 1.25 inches thick, a piece of 3/4 and a piece of 1/2 inch screwed together, cut the dimension that a smaller filter size will be. The reason it's in there that I cut this and didn't use the filter itself is this is rigid, and I could, you know, get it accurately, because this is plastic, this is moving all around, so I need something to stabilize this so that I can start working in. Right now I'm working on this track here, which I'm sliding into the old track here, and this will be what retains the front, and then I'll have to come around and make a rear flange over here to support the back side of the filter so that it stays stationary. And then I'll screw it in from the side of the box here. Of course, I'll have to trim it out before I install it, so it's at the same level as what I've done as far as clearancing this box down, make sure that it's clear of all the mechanisms. But it's a little awkward. I got to work inside the car, because this box flexes in order to come out, and if I start adding aluminum pieces to it, it's not going to come out. Even with the computer out of there, it's difficult to get this box out of here, because there's 2 studs, one here and one here, so you have to slide it forward in order to get it out, and that means that the whole box has to flex. So I'm having to awkwardly work inside here, so it's a little bit of a challenge. Okay, what I've got here, like I said, is a wooden representation of the filter, so because it's rigid and allows me to work with it a little bit better. So what I've made up here, this piece of aluminum, it's 2 pieces of aluminum actually riveted together. You can see this fits into the track where the old filter fit, and then you can see it's trimmed over to the point where this is where the new filter edge will end up. So basically now I have to fasten it through the side here, and that'll hold it in place and create a new closure, and then I'll have to close up everything around here in order to make this the airflow just into this pocket over here and not be all over the place. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you that before that was in place. It was a little hard to see. Okay, put the hinge plate and everything back in the position temporarily, as it would be if the hood was on the car. So see if everything will clear. I've capped everything off as far as just the fresh air filter yet. I have a lot more work to do to cap off the entire the entire cabin air intake. But what I did was I took the existing filter. As you can see, it needs changing anyway, so I just cut it down to the size that I have this thing reduced to, and I'm just going to slide that in right now. And that's about it for that aspect of it. Like I said, I still have to enclose the top of this box so that it confines the air coming through the cowl and out this opening over here, and just forces it all into this box here. Alright, without the hinge in the way, I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, this box that holds the filter, which it only has one pop-up end on it now where you can pull the filter up and out. You know, that's just basically been narrowed this far, so it's out of the way of all the hinges. This has all been cut down to where the hinge doesn't interfere with any of this box over here. This already had a scallop in it, so it's the diagonal tube just fits right down through that, so that doesn't have to. That's not an issue. So the next thing I have to do is, well, let me show you first. That's just the firewall head. It has this padding on it, and it was cut and it was kind of frayed, so I went ahead and just took some aluminum air conditioning HVAC ductwork. This aluminum tape works pretty good, and I taped that to the box after I wiped the box down with some lacquer thinner to get good adhesion. So now I've got that confined all the way around here. I hit it with some zinc chromate flat primer just to dull it down for now. Get rid of the shiny aluminum in there. And now I've made up this piece over here, which basically ends up creating the rest of the top of this box over here, and closes the entire box off, so that this is the only opening now. So the air coming out of the cowl goes into just this area here. So now once this is installed and sealed up, then I have to make a cap that will go from this upper portion here basically down to the top here, so that any air coming in will be directed down into this area here. So just working my way along here, trying to close this up and get some of these functional bits so they're not interfering with the hood action. Alright, I just thought I'd show you what this looks like sealed up before I touch it up, and it doesn't become so obvious. What I did is I set it down in like a tray so that it's below this edge here, so I know I'm clear of everything, and then I sealed up all the edges. So like I said, this is the only input that I'm left with, and I'm going to make a lid to go over top of that and cap the whole mess off. Alright, so I'm working on the bottom side of this hood reinforcement now. I've filled in this cutout here, and later on I'll be filling this one in also, because this member needs to be pretty strong, because this is where the hood hinges are located. I've gone ahead and made this, welded some capture plates to a piece of 3/16 steel, and that's going to be going up on the inside here, and that'll be welded into place, and then that way I'll have a solid mount for the hood hinges. So as I was talking about before, I drilled a couple of holes in the hinges before I disassembled them from where they were adjusted on the car, so that I could relocate these hinges right back where they went, and so everything lines up. Just ran a couple of bolts through there by hand to see if everything was good. Now that we're all welded up, that's where we're at. Well, it's always something in the weeds trying to mess you up. So I got this all together and started putting my hinge plates back in on this side, and I realized there was going to be no way to loosen and tighten the bolts on either side here. Don't have enough space even for a small ratchet to go in between this little sidewall, and I don't want to make this any narrower. I could have probably made this sidewall very low and then made up for it when I made my cap for the top box, but that would have meant tearing all this back out. I got that already sealed up. So what I did was I just drilled a couple of oversized holes so that I can get a little wobble socket through that hole on either side, so that I can tighten and loosen those bolts in case I need to tip the hinge for a little final adjustment. Anyway, there's always something. Okay, I've got both sides plated up and filled in there. Like I say, once it's out of this device, I still have another section to fill in on both sides. This is that cavity that I had to allow for the latch to swing through. I finished this all out, boxed it in, cleaned up all of this. That's for the catch. So we're about ready to put it back together with the main skin over there. But before I do, I wanted to make sure. One of the main issues of why I took it apart in the first place was that it didn't quite match the cowl, and trying to manipulate it was only going to buckle the upper skin. So what I've done here is I've taken a piece of 035 steel and I've put a 1-inch flange on it, and then I put a 1/2-inch flange, and I shrunk it so that it's contoured now and fits the top of this cowl. And then what I'll do is I'll take this piece, and when I assemble that over there, before I put my final spot welds on my back edge, I'll clamp this to it and make sure that it's conforming, and we'll be as close as we can possibly be with that. So that's what's up next. Alright, so both halves of the hood are back together. I went down the edges and reinforced these little cutouts over here that clearance the shock towers. Everything's been spot welded back up, plug welded I should say, across the top. The only place I didn't plug weld it was along this back edge, because while it's, it matches that profile that I made up, I want to make sure that when I put it on the car that I still have the ability to tap it down or lift it up just a little bit before this gets committed here. So I've just got this with some countersink rivets going through here just to hold it, about 5 rivets, and that way it can slide a little bit if I give it a little tap with a hammer. If I welded this up, that would be the shape, the end. So just a little insurance policy there. Anyway, getting ready to put this back up on the car now. Alright, so that worked out okay. The hood arcs nicely with the cowl now. I'm still dissatisfied with the size of the gap here, but some of that might be a an optical illusion, because I have it painted gray up to this part where it rolls off. But if anything, if I want to tune it up, I will probably just add to the back side of the hood a little bit at the top portion, because that's the portion that, while it gives you the visual, it's the one that comes up and out and away. You don't want to add anything to the bottom edge. I've got that back edge beat back at an angle also, because it was scraping. You could see where it scraped the paint off of the cowl when I had it in there with its stock form, which was more of a less of a 90 degree, so that it was closer at the bottom, because this cowl seems to be tapered forward all the way along here. So having that at 90 degrees means that it was closer at the bottom than it was at the top. So I back beveled it a little bit like that, correct for that angle, So now it opens and closes without rubbing. So we'll move on to, I'd like to say we're going to move on to the fenders right now, but I have to finish up the top of that air box. It's the last thing I have to do under the hood to make sure that it clears and everything. I had to wait till I got the hood back on because you don't want to go building a top for that and finishing it out, closing the hood, then it dents it and it's the wrong size. So anyway, I'll be on to that, and then the fenders will be after that, hopefully. All right, so sometimes there's some shapes that are just so complex that I give up and I just start horsing it together, making a mock-up, because so many things going on, and slopes, angles, stuff that interferes, step downs, flanges, reverse flanges. So now that I've got that made, I'll start making a more formal pattern for that and get that done. All right, so since I've decided to not try and maintain these wheel openings, I'm going to not need to manipulate these fenders the way I was going to have to try and twist them out. So I went ahead and I put them back in their locations and re-welded the spot welds here. And in the front, what I went ahead and did also was I drilled a couple of holes, little oblong holes in the bottom. And instead of trying to, this is the normal way the 68 fender would attach. But since my pinch weld is nowhere near as far under as an actual 68 Charger, my connection point will be a little bit more obvious. So I don't want to see this flange, when you're standing there on the ground, looking at the car. So we'll try and put a flange on the cars to where I can bolt it in an up direction, but it'll still be able to be slid in and out for adjustment. Anyways, so yeah, I'm going to start to get to work on these. I've got to clear the other fender out the way I've cleared these out. Over here, I've made some temporary brackets using a bolt-up point here near the headlight pods, and also another one over here on the shock tower. And what these will do is they'll just allow me to hang it on there without it falling all over the place while I figure out the location and how I'm going to attach it. Okay, so there's that cover finally on. The air box turned out to be pretty convoluted because I had to make a pretty big indented cover here because it was hitting the bottom of the hinge in a couple of places. It's never over when you think you're home free. Sometimes you still have interferences. Anyway, it's in there, it fits. What it does is it locks up underneath there like that, then drops down, and there's a couple of screws, one on the side and one in the front, that hold it from coming off. All right, so that's the front end, just kind of hung on there with clamps. No permanent bracketry made up yet. Took me about a day to get this thing steered into close where it needs to go. Working with the body lines and trying to close things up a little bit. We could afford to come back a tick with this one over here. The hood seems to be somewhat okay. It gets narrow in the front, but that seems to be the shape of the actual fender, as opposed to, as you can see, it happens here too. It's tight in the front, a little wide in the center here. I don't know what to do about that, but I got the roll pan in, just clamped in. I have to put a porta power in and spread this out because it doesn't really match the shape of the bottom of the fender. I got to get the fenders torqued out a little bit. It's about a quarter of an inch, I should say, sticking out beyond the edges of the fender over here. You can see right there where the bumper little scallop is. You can see it sticking out right there a little bit on both sides. So I had a clearance about 2 inches out of the bottom of it in the front to get it to clear the radiator on the Challenger. Over on this side, we have the opposite situation. We're a little tight on the body line over here. I've already got the hood a little bit skewed to where it's a little bit opened up on this side, a little closed up on that side, in order to steer the hood to kind of swing the fenders out and kind of give them a little bit of length over here. I might have to do a little bit more of that to get that going, because the distance here, of course, I'm going to change these wheel holes is kind of different. Saying it's got to go forward a little bit, because over here you got a little gap over here, as opposed to on the other side where it's tight. So that means that this fender's probably got to get pulled a little more forward, which everything says it is, but I have to sacrifice a pretty decent gap back here, because that's what's going to happen, because I'll have to pull this hood, like I said, rotate it out a little bit to kind of steer everything over. We'll see. I got a lot of playing with it. I don't have any permanent bracketry made whatsoever. It's like I said, it's just hanging up there. All that bracketry is going to be quite the job to get in and get out of there. Jack the car up, get the tires off, all that good stuff. And then I'll have to come up with some bumper brackets and fool around and see how the grill fits, all of that stuff. Mock everything up to see if I've got any hidden problems. I hate to get to a point where I think everything's good and then put all that stuff in and have it look crooked. But the doors had to be adjusted again. I still have a little bit more adjustment on this door and that door over there to get them to line up a little bit better with the fenders. It's just a dance, back and forth. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm just going to leave it here and enjoy the view for 10 minutes before I start digging in again.